Thank you, everybody, for attending tonight. And we've finally got some really good weather to get our pools going. Hopefully, everybody's got their pool up and running. Tonight, I'm going to kind of go over really just preventative maintenance on how to make sure you've got a great looking pool, a safe pool for the summer. And like Tony said, we normally do these seminars in person where we typically hold a spring pool opening school and a winterizing school, but with the whole COVID thing, we've kind of gone to uh, remote learning. So tonight I'm going to spend probably 35 minutes maximum, pretty quick and easy on kind of basic pool care. And like Tony said, if you've got a question, just ask it in the chat. He'll kind of keep an eye on that and we'll answer those at the end. A couple things that I'm going to try and highlight tonight. Some of you may have heard there is a little bit of a chlorine shortage nationwide. And so one of the things I'm going to talk about tonight is how to kind of maximize how long chlorine's going to last. A couple of things that we can do to really minimize how quickly it dissipates, those kind of things. So that'll be a little bit of the things that I'm going to be focusing on tonight. So let's get started. So really my main objective tonight, and Tony as well, we want to make sure that your pool is ready for a summer of fun, backyard memories, and the things I'm going to cover tonight, a little bit on the pool anatomy. Any of you that are new pool owners will just discuss some of the components of the pool, what we call the 5 keys to pool care, and then we'll get into really the kind of the water care, which is really 2 areas, the water balance and the different pool care systems that you can use. So whether you use traditional chlorine, maybe some of you have a salt water pool, some of you might use soft swim, which is a non-chlorine system. We'll really kind of cover each one of those in a little bit of detail, but if you need more information, stop by any of the 4 pool and spa house stores in the Portland, Vancouver area, and Tony and his staff would be glad to discuss those with you. So the first things first, especially if you are a new pool owner, is it's important to understand how the pool works. And so obviously we've got a body of water, and whether you have an in-ground pool or an above-ground pool, pretty much they're the same, except there's typically one thing that a above ground pool doesn't have that an in-ground pool does, that main drain at the bottom of the pool. That's typically just in ground pools. And the way the water flows is the water is basically drawn from the pool, either at the main drain if you have one, and at the skimmer, and it goes back. If you can kind of follow my red dot here, the water flows back to the pump, then it goes out the pump into the filter, the heater, the chlorinator if you have one, or if you've got a salt system, you've got a cell, and then the water goes back to the pool. It's just kind of a big circle. And a couple things that we want to pay attention to here. The skimmer at the top of the pool, we want to make sure that skimmer basket is kept clean, and that the little gate that's in kind of the front, especially any of you with in-ground pools, that you've got a little bit of a gate there that kind of bobs up and down. That's what gives the skimming action, and it draws the dirt and debris that's on top of the pool into the skimmer basket. That's basically a pre-filter. And we want to make sure that gate is operating properly. It gives kind of a waterfall effect that draws the dirt and debris into the skimmer basket. The other thing that we want to keep an eye on the front of the pump, that's called the hair and lint trap. There's a little basket in there. We want to keep that clean as well, because if that gets all clogged up with the debris, that will greatly reduce our circulation and we're not going to get good water flow through the system. I'll talk about the filter in a little bit, but that's how the water flows. Just one other thing, where the water comes back into the pool, the return inlets, we want to make sure that those are slightly, if you've got directional eyeball fittings, not all pools do, but if you've got a directional eyeball fitting on those return lines, we want them slightly tilted down at about a 45-degree angle. So we're kind of driving that water down towards the bottom of the pool to get the best circulation possible. All right, so that's how a pool works. These are what we call the 5 keys to pool care, and I'm going to go through each one of these. We'll talk about circulation. This is the amount of time that you run the pump. We'll talk about how the filter works a little bit and how to keep it clean. Some of the best practices as far as cleaning chores like brushing and vacuuming, those kind of things. The things that we need to test for, things like the chlorine level, the pH. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about how often to bring a water sample into the pool and spa house and have them run it through their computerized water testing machine and computer. And then we'll get into really the water chemistry, which is water balance and the different pool care programs that you can use. So let's get started. So the first thing, people always ask, how long should I run my pump? And we recommend a minimum of 10 to 12 hours a day. And frankly, the more the better. The longer that we can run the pump, the water is being filtered, it's cleaned, the chemicals that we're putting in are being distributed properly. So a minimum of 10 to 12 hours a day. And anytime that you have any kind of a water quality issue like cloudy water, algae, we want to run 24 hours a day until we solve the problem. One of the things, this is maybe a little bit technical, but we kind of calculate um, how fast the water turns over by turnover rate. In most pools, say for example, when an in-ground pool is built, it typically, when the builder builds it, they want to have somewhere around a 6 or 8 hour turnover rate that they can, say you've got a 20,000 gallon pool, you can circulate 20,000 gallons of water through the pump, the filter, the heater, the chlorinator in about 8 hours. And what happens is after one turnover, only about 42% of the water is filtered. After two, 84%, and so on. That's frankly why, like in a commercial pool at a hotel, motel, they have to run 24 hours a day to ensure that they're getting around 4 turnovers a day. We don't necessarily have to do that in a residential pool, but if, again, we want to have a minimum of 10 to 12 hours a day, but the more you can run it, the better, the cleaner it will keep the pool. And yeah, it's going to cost a few extra dollars in electricity, but it will keep the pool looking nicer. So that's the first step, good circulation. The second step is having good filtration, and the filter is there to really get stuff out of the water, particulate matter, keep the water clear, keep the products, the chemicals that we're putting in to make sure that they're working effectively. And down at the bottom of the slide, you can see the three different types of filters that are available. Sand filters on the left, in the middle is a cartridge filter, and the one on the far right is a diatomaceous earth filter. Um, if you don't know what type of filter you have, you might want to write the model number down. And the next time you're in the pool and spa house, let them know what kind of filter you have, maybe the model number, so they can kind of keep track of that if you ever need a new part or a pressure gauge, something like that, because it's important that that filter is in good working order, where we need to clean it periodically. Routine backwashing if it's a sand filter, where we'll chemically clean the filters periodically. We recommend twice a year chemically cleaning the filter, whether it's the sand, the cartridge filter. Usually in the Northwest, we use a product called Strip Quick, which is basically a degreaser to get greases and oils out of the filter. And at the pool and spa house, they have a real easy to use instruction sheet on the different types of filters to chemically clean them. And we recommend twice a year when you close the pool in the fall, and then maybe midwinter, or I'm sorry, midsummer, July, you'd want to chemically clean the filter again. If you didn't chemically clean your filter last fall, I definitely recommend doing it now as well. So it's important to keep that in good working order. The other thing that's in my slide over here on the left, this is called a skimmer. This is basically a skimmer sock. If you tend to get a lot of fine debris in your pool, that you get a lot of that fine debris that maybe gets through the skimmer basket and gets caught in the hair and lint pot in the pump, this could really help pull that kind of stuff out and act as more of a pre-filter so it doesn't clog up either your hair and lint pot or your filter. And these are just disposable. You just replace these once a month. And it, it also contains a chemical called Miselex that pulls out body oils and suntan lotions, that kind of thing as well. So that can be helpful to keep the pool a little bit cleaner. So good filtration is important. We do need to change the filter media, whether it's the sand or a cartridge filter. Typically you can get 4 or 5 years out of the sand, maybe 2 or 3 years out of the cartridge filter, something like that, where you may need to replace those periodically as well. So that's the second step. One of one of the things that we can do to help the filter work a little bit better, there are some chemical additives like pool juice phosphate remover, or there's some water clarifying aids that can help the filter pull out more particulate. So some people find these kind of products helpful to keep the water extra clear and to help the filter work a little bit better. Okay, so the third key is keeping the pool clean. And this is probably the least fun part of owning a pool, but a necessary part. And what we're talking about here is really keeping the pool free of debris, vacuuming, as needed. If you've got debris on the bottom of the pool, we want to vacuum it out. We do recommend brushing the pool once a week, getting your nylon brush out, brushing the walls, the bottom of the pool. What that does is a couple things. It gets anything that's maybe starting to grow on the walls either out into the water where the chemicals can remove it or the filter can remove it. Skimming, if you've got debris floating on the surface, we want to skim that out. I'll talk about some of the other chemical cleaning that we could do here in a second, but the cleaner you keep the pool, the less chemicals that you'll use. Chlorine gets consumed by debris in the pool. The pH can get out of balance if we don't keep the pool clean. So keeping the pool clean will help reduce chemical consumption as well. There are some cleaners that you can use if you've got a little bit of debris around the water line. Products like Off the Wall are basically water line cleaners that will remove grease and oil and scale deposits, especially if you've got a vinyl line pool where sometimes, especially the side of the pool that gets the most amount of sun during the day, if you get a little bit of a scum line there, you tend to kind of bake that material, that debris onto the liner. So we definitely want to keep that removed as needed so it doesn't become kind of a permanent stain. And then if you still have your winter cover on your pool and you're getting ready to take that off, there are cleaners like Stowaway that will help protect that winter cover during the summer so that when you put it back on next fall, it's ready to go and it's clean and it doesn't have any mold and mildew. Okay, so that's the cleaning portion. The next area is the testing, where we want to test the water, and we recommend, depending on if you're a residential pool owner, or I know we had a couple of commercial people that were going to be attending tonight's webinar. Commercial pools, they actually have to test the water every 4 hours for chlorine and pH. Residential pools, we typically recommend once or twice a week, whether you use a test strip or a test kit. Now, you commercial operators have to use a test kit, but we want to test the chlorine and the pH levels, at least once a week in a residential pool. And then I would highly recommend once a month, bring a water sample into the pool and spa house and have them do a free computerized water test on your water to test some of the other things like total alkalinity and calcium hardness and cyanuric acid, test for any metals that are in the water, those kind of things that don't need to be tested quite as often, um, but could be helpful. And again, the testing they do in the store is complimentary. A couple things about the testing equipment. The test strips, those do have a expiration date on them, so we don't want to use them too far past the expiration date. Also, when you take the test strip out of the bottle, make sure your fingers aren't wet so that we get any moisture into the rest of the strips to contaminate those. So want to use, pretty good practices here so we don't ruin those strips. If you've got a test kit, the little liquid reagents that we use, those have a 1 year shelf life, so you want to replace those before the beginning of every season. So this is really the only way you know how well you're doing with the pool. Do you have enough chlorine in the water? Is the pH in balance? And I'm going to talk about that next. But especially if you got to have a residential pool, the health department isn't coming out to your pool. You are the health department, and you want to make sure that the water is safe for you and your family to swim in. Okay, so as far as the water chemistry, I kind of divide this section up into two areas, really the water balance and the different pool care programs that we can use. And so whether you use chlorine, you're on a saltwater system, you use soft swim, whatever system you're on, we all have to maintain good water balance. And it consists of really three main things: the pH of the water, total alkalinity, calcium hardness. There's a couple other things that are included, total dissolved solids, and we kind of encompass that into what's called the saturation index. That's getting a little bit too technical, but the main ones that we're concerned with are the pH, the total alkalinity, and the calcium hardness. So we'll look at each of those. And the reason that they're so important is really these four areas right here. The first thing is your comfort in the water, especially our eyes. When the pH gets very far out of that, basically the sweet spot that we call it, 7.4 to 7.6, we can get skin irritation, eye irritation, where if you're noticing everybody getting out of the pool and their eyes look like road maps because they're all bloodshot, that's a good indication that the pH is out of whack. The second thing is equipment longevity. The keeping the pH in the proper range will allow the pool surfaces, the plumbing, and equipment to last the longest. These two pictures that I've got on my slide here, the one on the top right, that's the inside of a gas pool heater. And this hole that you see here, that was eaten away because of low pH being in the pool water. And when that low pH water runs through that heat exchanger, it starts to dissolve it and ruins the heater. And unfortunately, this kind of damage is not covered by manufacturers' warranties. That's they'll know that it's been damaged because of a pH issue. So we definitely want to prevent that to happen. Same thing with this pump impeller that was eaten away by low pH as well. So the pool, the equipment will last the longest, keeping it in that proper pH range. The third thing is water clarity. The water stays the clearest when the pH is in the proper range. What happens is that the pH drifts up a little bit high. That's one of the causes of cloudy water. So we definitely want to avoid that. And if the pH is too low, it actually makes the water maybe a little bit extra clear, but that's not good because that can cause some corrosion issues like you see in the pictures here. And then the fourth reason is sanitizer effectiveness. So especially chlorine is very pH sensitive, and especially as we were talking at the beginning, we want to maximize how long chlorine lasts in the pool. What happens with chlorine, if the pH is too low, it dissipates too quickly and we kind of waste chlorine. And if the pH is too high, then it becomes lazy and isn't as effective killing bacteria. So we don't want that either. One of the questions we get quite often is what causes the pH to change? Maybe you've tested the pH, this week in the proper range, or it was maybe out of range and you got it into balance, and a few days later it's out of whack again. It's really everything that gets into the water can affect the pH. We get a little bit of rain in the Northwest, body oils, the different chemicals that we use, pretty much anything that gets into the water can have an impact on the pH. So one of the ways that we help minimize that impact is by maintaining what's called total alkalinity. And some of you may be testing for this at home or at your commercial pool. And what total alkalinity is, this is basically the buffer for the pH. When it's in the proper range, the pH stays a lot more stable. So when all this different components get into the water, whether it be the chemicals or algae or body waste, it protects the pH from fluctuating. In fact, when you start up your pool in the spring, this is typically the very first thing that we balance. Once this is in balance, the pH stays very stable. And especially here in the Northwest, our total alkalinity, which is certain minerals that are in the water, is very low. So it's not uncommon to have to add a fair amount of total alkalinity increaser at the beginning of the season to get this in balance so our pH stays stable. So the products that we typically will use for these two adjustments, if the pH or the total alkalinity is low, well, if the total alkalinity is low, we add Balance Pack 100, the product in the middle. If the pH is low, we add Balance Pack 200 on the right. And if the pH or total alkalinity is high, we add Low and Slow on the left. Pretty simple. These products get added directly to the pool with the pump and filter operating, allow it to circulate for a half an hour, and boom, you've got the pool back in balance. Again, if you do, as you know, we're going through this fairly quickly. If you've got any questions, just ask them in the chat section. And when we get to the end, we'll definitely answer any questions that have come up. The third water balancing factor that we also want to keep an eye on is really the calcium hardness. This is, as you can imagine, the amount of calcium that's in the water. And for the most part, in most of Western Washington, Western Oregon, we have very low calcium. That's why we don't have to put water softeners on our homes, that type of thing. But the water's a little bit too soft for swimming pools. And what happens is if the calcium is too low, that tends to cause some deterioration of plaster or grout in the pool, or can cause corrosion of metal surfaces, which obviously we don't want. If the calcium happened to get a little bit too high, which it does in some, some well water, that can tend to cause cloudy water or scale formation. And so it's pretty easy to correct this. If the calcium hardness is too low, we'll add a product called Balance Pack 300, which is a calcium hardness increaser. Pretty simple. And if it's too high, there's really no chemical that pulls calcium out of the water. So if it's too high naturally, if maybe you're on well water that just has high calcium hardness, we'll put a product in called scale inhibitor that will prevent scaling. This picture that you see in the middle of my slide, this is a cartridge filter that's been all caked up with scale because of high calcium hardness and high pH. We obviously want to avoid that. So the calcium hardness, typically if we test this once a month, that's adequate. And really the same with the total alkalinity. The total alkalinity doesn't fluctuate very much. So if you folks just keep an eye on the pH and the chlorine level that I'm going to talk about here in a minute, and let the pool and spa house help you with total alkalinity and the calcium hardness, it'll make it real easy to keep your pool in balance. This slide here shows really all of the water quality parameters that we want to maintain. I'm going to talk about chlorine here in just a minute, but the rest of these are the general ranges that we want to keep the pool in. And so the pH typically somewhere between about 7.2 and 7.8, total alkalinity 125 to 150 parts per million, and calcium hardness 175 to 225. Those are the industry standards of what we're shooting for to keep the water in proper balance. So when you bring a water sample into the store, this is what the computer is going to help you keep these items in balance. All right, so that was water balance. The next area is the different pool care systems that we can use. So whether you use traditional chlorine, say chlorine tablets or granules, um, or whether you use a salt system or use soft swim, which is a non-chlorine system, they all require three things: some type of sanitizer to kill bacteria and to keep the water safe, some type of an oxidizer. You've probably all heard the term shocking the pool. That's what we refer to as oxidizing the water to keep it crystal clear and remove contaminants from the water. And then we ideally want to keep something in the water to prevent algae from ever occurring. So pretty much a three-step system. The first step is keeping chlorine in the water. And I'll talk about soft swim in a little bit, but if you use chlorine, or if you have a salt system on your pool, which is basically a chlorine system, we need to keep chlorine in the water to kill bacteria and some of the different types of algae. And probably the biggest thing is to protect the swimmers from disease transmission, like swimmer's ear or little skin rashes, those kind of things. That's why we keep chlorine in the water. It also helps keep the water clean and clear, and the amount of chlorine that we want to maintain in the water, that will show up on our test strip or on the test kit, is 1 to 4 parts per million. We never want to get in the pool when the chlorine level is below 1 part per million. And frankly, we don't want to get it when it's above 4 parts per million. That's the EPA registration for chlorine. 1 to 4 parts per million is really the level that we want to maintain. And if you know that you're going to have maybe a big 4th of July party, probably want to have that chlorine level closer to the 3 or 4 part per million range. Keep it a little bit to the higher side to compensate for bather load. If you know that it's going to be raining for a few days and you're not going to be using the pool, 1 part per million is perfectly fine, but you can kind of adjust that based on the bather load and the amount of people that the type of usage that you're going to have. And be aware that when we get into July and August and it's warmer, pools being used more, you're going to tend to go through more chlorine at that point. So,
So I got a question.
yeah,
Um, does the rain like affect the chlorine? Does it kill the chlorine or what?
yeah, it does. The rain will cause the chlorine to dissipate faster. It's really three or
Okay.
four things. People in the
Okay.
pool, the rain, the debris, the amount of sunlight. Sunlight will tend to cause the chlorine to dissipate a little bit. So really all of those factors, even how warm you keep the water. If you've got a heater on your pool and you like to keep the water temperature at 87, you're going to tend to use a little bit more chlorine than somebody that maybe doesn't have a heater on it and it's just and maybe has a solar blanket on it and the temperature is at 78 degrees. Water temperature will play into that as well.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yep.
Like,
And so probably the most commonly used type of chlorine is going to be a chlorine tablet or stick that you see here on the right. These are called Silk Guard Complete sticks and tablets. Very cost effective. This is really the strongest form of chlorine that you can really use in a residential or commercial pool besides gas chlorine, which frankly nobody uses anymore. And so these can be fed through an automatic feeder, a floating dispenser. Some people feed them through the skimmer. Um, these are very long lasting. The typical consumption is 1 pound per 10,000 gallons of water per week. The tablets that you see, probably the most common are these 3-inch tablets or these sticks. These both weigh 8 ounces, so two of them obviously equal a pound. Typically you're going to go through about two of these per 10,000 gallons of water per week. So if you're a new pool owner, one of the things that's important to know is how many gallons of water you have in your pool, because pretty much all of the chemicals that we're going to be adding are based on the gallonage. So if you don't know how many gallons of water that you have in the pool, Tony and his team at the Pool and Spa House can calculate this very easily for you. They just need to know a few things: the shape of your pool, the length of your pool, the width of the pool, and the depth of your pool, both the shallow end and the deep end. And they can calculate the gallonage very easily and help you figure out how much product that you're going to need. So these chlorine tablets and sticks, again, are long lasting. They also contain a couple of added ingredients that make the water feel softer after about 2 or 3 weeks of dissolving into the water. They also contain a scale inhibitor, um, stain preventative, and algae prevention as well.
right. Thank you.
But um, if you have a salt pool, I don't know how many of you have a salt pool, but if you do, people always ask, what's the difference between a salt pool and a traditional chlorine pool? And and basically, a salt pool, you make your own chlorine. Is you've got an electronic device and you add salt to the pool, and as the salt water runs through this electronic device, this is a good example down here at the bottom slide. That's a saltwater cell. And as the salt water runs through that cell, we call it an electrolytic generator. It converts salt water into chlorine. Chlorine kills algae and bacteria. It converts back to salt. And so it just keeps reproducing. And so basically, it's a chlorine system. These have been pretty popular for the last 10, 15 years, but it is a chlorine system. We maintain the same levels of chlorine, 1 to 4 parts per million. You're just making your own chlorine with that system. Just a couple of things, couple of tips on keys to success for saltwater pools. It's real important at the beginning of the season you do establish a chlorine stabilizer residual to make sure that the chlorine that's being generated lasts as long as possible. You also want to keep a little bit closer eye on the pH with a saltwater system. It tends to make the pH rise, and you'll normally just need pH decreaser, the low and slow type product, to keep the pH down. It's also important to add a scale inhibitor once a month because we do tend to get a little bit more potential for scale on a saltwater system. And we also recommend at least once a season, chemically cleaning that saltwater cell because it does tend to build up with scale and want to keep that clean. All right. So whether you use traditional chlorine or have a salt water system, we do need to oxidize periodically, and we recommend once a week shocking the pool. And some of you maybe have wondered, what does shocking actually do? This removes contaminants, things like perspiration and suntan lotions, cosmetics, those kind of things from the water, helps keep the water crystal clear and prevents problems before they begin. So again, we recommend shocking weekly to remove those waste to keep it clear. If you go into one of the pool and spa house stores, you'll see, a few different shock treatments they have. We typically will recommend Smart Shock. This is really the best weekly shock treatment. It doesn't raise the chlorine level too high.
There you go.
Contains a few added ingredients that help buffer the pH, clarifies the water. Also contains some algae killing crystals. Very easy to use, 1 pound per 12,000 gallons of pool water once a week. Most people tend to do this like Sunday night after the pool's had the heaviest usage over the weekend. Add it, straight to the pool with the pump and filter operating. If you normally keep a solar blanket on your pool, we tend to recommend keeping that off for about 6 to 8 hours after you shock the pool, because there is a chemical process that takes place, and these contaminants that we're trying to oxidize actually gas off from the pool, so we want them to be able to escape into the atmosphere. This is the step that keeps the pool crystal clear. So especially if you've had a big party over the weekend, lots of kids, that night would be the perfect time to shock the pool.
All right, I'm gonna go get a shower.
All right. The third step is adding some type of a preventative algaecide, because people ask all the time, doesn't chlorine kill algae? And it does kill a lot of them, but not all of them. And algae is constantly entering the pool from rain, wind, runoff, and so we need to periodically add a.
Oh, I just phoned in the phone number. There's a dial in, so you can do it like on your landline.
There we go. We need to add a preventative algaecide. Typically, we'll add one when we open up the pool in the spring, and then we'll add another maintenance dose once a week to prevent the different types of algae, because there's thousands of species of algae, but we group them by color: green algae, black algae, and mustard algae. And chlorine prevents especially green algae, but the things like black algae and mustard algae, they need a little bit of a boost, and that's why we put a preventative algaecide in, like Algae Complete, once a week. This is basically a dual action algaecide that contains both a copper based and what we call a quat based algaecide. Kills and prevents all types of algae, works in all pools, it's non-foaming, and you can see the dosages at the bottom, where we add at the beginning of the season 8 ounces per 10,000 gallons, and then a ½ ounce per 10,000 gallons once a week to prevent all types of algae. We'll also use this if you ever do get algae where the pool turns green, or you get black algae spots on the pool or mustard algae. We'll use this as well to kill it. Okay, so those are the 3 primary steps. There are a couple of extra things that we can do if we want to maximize chlorine efficiency. Things like the pool juice phosphate remover that I talked about at the beginning. This can help keep the pool clear, keeps the water line clean, and also removes keeps the phosphate levels low that can contribute to algae growth and to cloudy water. The dosage is 4 ounces per 10,000 gallons. And then there's things like optimizer that can be added that will also help maximize the life of chlorine as well, and makes the water feel much softer, especially if you've got kids that like to swim underneath the water with their eyes open. Very, very gentle on the eyes, and this will also lengthen the life of the chlorine in the pool. So a few different things that you can do to maximize chlorine performance: the 3-step program, plus pool juice, phosphate remover, and optimizer. And this is kind of a typical season usage for a 20,000 gallon pool. people always ask, how much product do I need for a season, especially with the chlorine shortage that we talked about. Typically, 20,000 gallon pool is going to go through about 25 pounds of chlorine tablets or sticks, about 24 pounds of shock, 1 bottle of algaecide, a bottle of pool juice phosphate remover, and if you choose to use optimizer, about 30 pounds of optimizer for the season. That's typical consumption. If any of you soft swim or are interested, this is a totally non-chlorine system, primarily used in smaller in-ground pools, above-ground pools, people that are allergic to chlorine. This is a good option. There's just 3 products involved, kind of like the chlorine system. You've got an algaecide, a sanitizer. The Soft Swim B is actually the sanitizer, and then Soft Swim C is a clarifier. So again, if you're allergic to chlorine or want something a little bit softer feeling on the water, this is a good option as well. These are the 4 pool and spa house stores in the Portland, Vancouver area. And Tony, do we have any questions?
Yeah, Laney's asked, my pool is a chlorine pool with a floating dispenser. You mentioned solar blankets. Do you have any tricks of the trade to cleaning our cover?
How to clean the solar blanket?
I'm assuming that's what she's meaning, yes.
Yeah, so the stowaway product that I talked about to clean the winter covers, you would clean that cover the same way. You get the stowaway comes in a quart, put a half a quart in a gallon or 2 of water, brush it on the cover, and you can do this on the pool or off of the pool. The product is totally compatible with the water chemistry. Flip it over, clean the other side. And it basically is a mildew side so that the cover won't mold and mildew, and a cleaner to get it clean as well. So it does a great job on solar blankets. And when you take the solar blanket off in the fall to put it away for the winter, you'd want to clean it with stowaway as well. Anything else, Tony?
Not so far.
If there's any other questions, I did. Let me go back in and pull everybody off mute here. There we go. Everybody's off of mute. So if you do have any questions, just speak up now.
Randy, you talked about the different types of filters. One thing we can maybe expand a little bit on, a lot of people have sand filters. That's one of the most popular filters, at least in our area. I got a lot of people this year that, not so much a lot of people having water quality issues, but those that are, one of the common denominators is sand that's been in their filter for a very long time. And it's amazing when we think something has been the case for a couple years, the reality tends to be that it's been probably twice as long as you really think that it's been. And so the reality is you have old sand that's older than 5 years old that, and it probably hasn't been methodically cleaned well with a filter cleaner degreaser like the Strip Quick. And ultimately, one of the claims typically is that my water is not getting filtered. I try to vacuum the pool and I see a debris cloud coming right back into the pool when I'm vacuuming through my filter. And so that most definitely brings up the conversation about the quality and care of the sand. So if your sand is older than 5 years, if you're not, well, let me say this: if your sand is older than 5 years, number one, we highly encourage and recommend that you replace it. And any of our stores can lead you that direction, and we've got some great products to recommend with that. But also, if you're not cleaning your sand, as Randy mentioned, at least once, if not twice a season with the Strip Quick, I highly recommend, and just to emphasize your point, Randy, is to make sure that you're doing that at the beginning of the season as you're opening your pools, because that can have a critical effect. We tend to focus our energies on chemistry when reality is it's back to that circulation slide that Randy was talking about, infiltration slide, that our circulation is hindered by the concern with the sand filter. So anyway, keep that in mind. The quality and care of the sand in your sand filter is very important.
Good point, Tony. Yeah, that first part of my presentation when I talked about circulation and filtration, those are probably, besides not having enough chlorine in the pool, those are probably the second most causes of cloudy water, those kind of things. If not running the pump long enough, or if the filter is dirty, or if the sand is old, definitely can hamper the water quality. Any other questions? Anything else, Tony, you want to add?
I don't think so. I think we covered the basics well. I would just say a couple points. Number one, particularly those that are on the phone catching this presentation this evening, we will be posting the presentation, visually speaking, on our YouTube page. So you can certainly check that out after the fact if you want to kind of go through the points again and revisit that. Also, our stores are open 9 to 6 during the week, Saturdays 9 to 5. If you're not familiar with our water testing lab, I'm pretty certain that most of you, if not all of you, are. But again, that water chemistry, testing your water frequently is a key part to staying on top and preventing problems. So just want to emphasize that as well. But if you have any questions tonight, Randy and I will hang out here for a little bit. You're welcome to hang on and ask those if you'd like. Otherwise, again, bring them to our stores. We're here to help.
Tony, I have a question.
Sure.
I have one of those Pentair pumps that you can see the RPM. When you say you want to run it for about 12 hours, what RPM should that be?
Okay, so just to clarify, you have what we call a variable speed pump. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so it's got this little attachment on the side of the motor that you can actually program the different speeds that it operates. So I just wanted to kind of bring everybody into the fold of your question. So thank you. Good question. So if you were, as Randy alluded to earlier, you would be required to have so many turnovers a day to have so much water movement to meet requirements. For a residential pool, you don't really have that. So I don't really have an answer to you. Water movement is water movement. It's if it's moving, that's a great thing. And if you've reduced the speed, that means you're using to do that. So really not necessarily a magic answer. Based on the way your plumbing is set up, hydraulics and all that sort of thing, sometimes your system just runs well at. So really no set speed, but from an RPM standpoint, really you kind of find that sweet spot. If you're vacuuming, you're going to ramp it up to the full speed, the 3,450 revolutions per minute, kind of that top speed when you're vacuuming, typically. But actually it's just a sweet spot, and I really don't have any more articulate answer than that. Randy, do you have
Tony,
anything
can you hear me?
to add? Yeah, give me 1 second. Any points to that?
I don't, Tony. I don't have a recommendation on that.
Question though. Question.
Can you hear us,
Yeah,
Tony?
yeah. Yes, go ahead. Is this
This is Joey and Vicky. We finally got the sound on.
no? Yes, Vicky, do you have a question?
No, we just finally got the sound going. I mean, for you to hear us. So we've been here the entire time. Okay.
Julie, sorry, Julie, I hear you now. Sorry, I got you.
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
just want to make sure
Vicky,
you knew that we attended.
Thank you. Glad you're with us. Was Eddie?
Yeah.
Was that you that had a question about the pump? about the,
Yes, yeah, that was me.
yeah, so I'll read perhaps tomorrow and we get a, yeah.
All right, awesome. Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, I wanted to thank you for taking time out of your week. I know we just came off the Memorial Day weekend. The weather's hot, and but our intentions tonight were to help you ultimately enjoy the oasis of your backyard. And we're glad that you have attended, and we hope that you've gained some nuggets out of this. Again, it'll be on our YouTube page, so check that out. Again, our stores are there to help with any questions you might have, and we just want to appreciate you joining us tonight. So thank you, Randy, and thank you for your
Thank
time.
you.
You're welcome.